the stories that you get, because a lot of the myth we get handed to us is complete nonsense.
Especially in our history.
Yeah.
And then this all ties back to what we started with, is the stone monkey effect.
The stone monkey effect,
so
where narcotics expanded.
So the idea that these apes, because I think my friend was telling me earlier that there's certain places, so like I think it's in Asia a lot. Obviously, they really worship cows, and like the origin of that is because the cow dung had mushrooms in it.
It's like Bill Hicks said, enlightenment is found in cow poo.
Is that what he says? Yeah. Wow.
He was just joking because he did like 20 diagrams of some psychedelic mushroom, and as he described it, he had his third eye squeegeed clean, and they were lying around in the field. I don't know if this is actually true or not, but the story was, he said, we were lying around for hours laughing after having taken it because we realised enlightenment comes from cow poo, and how ridiculous is that?
That's the funny irony of it. Which
weirdly ties into Buddhism, because we've got the Lotus Sutra, we've got the lotus growing in muddy swamps. Same thing with like roses grow from manure,
Yeah.
And it's the cycle.
Well, that's the coup of life. Have you learned about Qi and Ku? I've just been researching this. Qi, Ku, and Chu.
Yes.
The key is the physical manifestation of life. Ku is the unseen. So like you could say like Ku is the cherry in the cherry blossom tree before it's come out. Or music, and then Chu is CHU is the middle way.
Yeah.
Because too much physical, too much spiritual is unbalanced. So it's like finding that kind of middle path.
Yeah. Weirdly, as Captain Kirk once said, too much of anything, even love, isn't necessarily a good thing.
Captain Kirk.
It's one of the
Where is Captain Kirk from?
Star Trek.
Oh yes, of course.
Kirk.
Kirk.
Kirk. Yeah. Too much of anything, Lieutenant, even love, isn't necessarily a good thing. It's the only quote of his that I ever really remember. And I'm a huge Star Trek fan, but I would not want to be on Kirk's ship. That was death central, that place.
Have you watched the Black Mirror with the Star Trek one?
Yes.
What did you think?
Well,
come on, it trips you out a bit. It's a bit mad. Like
I liked. There's a lot of it I did like. The thing I didn't like was the fact that for Charlie Brooker, this is really odd, but it relied on the really lazy cliche of the science fiction fan who was rubbish with women. And was.
But you're saying the story is quite basic in that sense, like a geeky science fiction fan.
All the actual stuff set in the virtual reality and all that stuff, I liked. That was quite a tight narrative.
It's quite scary, wasn't it?
But the origin point, which was this sad loser who's a geek and a sci-fi fan, was really cliched and like has been done. And it's like we've moved beyond that now. Yes, those people exist, obviously, but you've got people who aren't sci-fi geeks who are like that, and it's a weird form of targeting. But all the stuff beyond that I really liked.
Yeah, especially when they actually turned into like an alien and think, ugh, that black lady. Do you know what it is? I felt trapped watching it myself. Like the idea that like, imagine you could really, because that's everything to do with Black Mirror is like, have you seen all of them pretty much?
I've seen
a couple seasons.
Most of it, yeah.
You know, there's like the one where like he takes your consciousness and puts you in an egg. And then like you pay for your consciousness to be duplicated, and then it's put into an egg, and then like you have to like keep the house running while I'm away. So you'll be the person to make my toast come up. But what you're not told is it's an absolute double of you. So you'll hate it. Like you'll be in a jail forever and ever and ever and ever, until they break you down. Like do you remember there's a scene where she's like, "Let me out," and he goes, "I'll see you in 6 months." And it's only a second for him, but he presses a button and she's there for 6 months, like in just a white space, like. Oh man.
Oh yeah, no, it's no.
They're not getting quite close to that, playing around.
There's a lot of it that is. Yeah. Well, look at I remember the first episode with the
pig.
The pig, and then not that much later, David Cameron and the Bullingdon Club and the floating a pig thing.
That happened afterwards.
Well, and not in terms of it being revealed.
Boy.
The Bullingdon Club.
Can you spell that for me?
Bullingdon.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, it's where all future scumbag politicians start off learning how to be a scumbag.
And they have to like have sex, or they have to do something vile. It's the idea that's where they got it from, for sure.
It's a frat boys club thing where they've got all these rituals and rites where you have to do things to prove that you're the right stuff. Like one of them is, in theory, you have to put your
bits in
penis
in a
pig.
Something that you never want to be in a dead pig's mouth.
Yeah, not a live pig. They're scum, but they're not that stupid. You put it in a live pig's mouth and you're not
getting it back.
Yeah, and the other thing was you have to burn a £50 note in front of a homeless person.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's other ones as well, but it's
sad.
It's awful. It's the dark part of the human psyche where we've got this desire for accumulating material wealth because we don't think there's anything more than physical existence. and the idea of dominating.
You get as much as you
Who
can.
dies with the most toys wins, as they say.
Yeah. Or it goes back to the pharaohs, where you can take it back to their past life, right? Like,
well, that's the funny thing, yeah. And as
take it into your forward life, sorry.
And as a sort of that element of spirituality is sort of stripped away, so, and for the most part for the better, but this is the sort of like the twisted side of it is you've got the pharaoh's mentality, but it's worse because you're doing it whilst you're still alive. Because you don't believe that anything else is going to happen. Because put it this way, if you knew there was an afterlife, like if irrevocably human consciousness was in...
It was a fact, like, it wasn't a faith thing.
And you could prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt, so it wasn't like, you know that when you die there's something else.
Yeah. We would live so differently.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, that's a beautiful thought.
But well, the thing is, it's partly beautiful and partly terrifying, because if you knew that for certain, you would investigate what the rules are, and people would still interpret. Like, if you just proved that, but you didn't know the sort of rules around it. Because if you knew for certain, every act you did...
Karmically came back to you.
Came back to you in the sense of... To boil it down simply, let's say there was a points tally, yeah? And if you ended up a certain amount positive, you got to the good... You
got to heaven.
You got to heaven.
Yeah.
Or at the very least reincarnated into a good position. However you want to interpret it. Yeah, your consciousness in some way carries on. And you knew negative points of that thing, but you didn't know what the rules were, then we have everything we've got today, but it'd be much worse, because people would, religious people who want the end of the world kind of thing would say, right, well, me killing you is a good thing, because
they'd bring Armageddon upon themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And if you didn't know the rules, but you just knew that your consciousness went on in some fashion, religious people would become more extreme because they'd interpret it their way, and so you would end up with even more holy wars and acts of terror, because they would be like, well, in my eyes...
They know this life is for something.
And the thing is, they would say, well, I've been brought up to believe this, and so I know that if I do these things against people who don't believe the same things as me, well, in my mind, my rules, the rules of my existence, soul going on, is killing the non-believer, the infidel, or like the non-Christian, whatever perspective you're coming from. Just using Abrahamic as an example. So what would be considered good and bad acts, even though they're up for interpretation now, they'd be hugely thrown open, because you would know something definitely happened. The end of your physical existence is not the end of your existence, full stop.
As an essence.
Yes.
So what are you saying? Are you saying like the unknowing keeps everything slightly balanced?
To an extent, not just that, but to an extent, yes. I think if you had all your horizons mapped out, if you knew, one, there'd be no such thing as faith anymore, not truly. And I'm talking, because this is going to sound strange, but there's good faith and there's bad faith. Like, because bad faith is when you have theological beliefs, whatever religion you want to call it. I'm not going to sort of pick on anyone in particular. And that's believing in something without proof, okay? And that means you are not questioning things. You are just going by how you're brought up necessarily, or whatever holy book you subscribe to.
Yeah.
Well, the fact you call it holy,
blind
for
faith.
one thing. But, I mean, it's a form of blind faith,
because
there's no proof. There's no, and people will argue this with.
Well, there's no seeking spirit from the person, just following.
Well, that's the thing, and then you've got good faith, which is believing in yourself and believing in people, and giving people the benefit of the doubt, and actually having, like you said, the seeking spirit, and having itching and determination to find things out, and the faith that you can be a better person, the faith that you can recognise your Buddha self. And obviously, just speaking of myself, obviously I'm biased because that's what I subscribe to, but faith where you seek proof, where you seek evidence, is much better than faith where you blindly accept something, or you don't question, because there's blind faith and there's not questioning faith. One's more of an extreme version of the other. But if you had
faith taken away completely,
if you had at least that element,
there's a destination to go.
Because let's say when you're born, you're given a manual that says X leads to Y leads to Z. You do this, you go to a good place. You do this, you go to a bad place. Then, whilst you could argue very much that, well, it would round off the edges of life. It would make life much less interesting if you had answers rather than questions.
Yeah.
But also, there's the fact that human beings, by their very nature, find ways to interpret certain things. So if you're told, certain acts are good and certain acts are bad, you've still got the same problems with religion then, even knowing that there's an afterlife, because people interpret things.
Yeah.
For example, I mean, it's an extreme one, but we were talking about the Crusades. Well, the Crusades were, despite, and I'll come on to this in more detail, but Christianity has the basic rule of thou shalt not kill, but it's also apparently okay to go on a crusade with an army and wipe out people who believe different things, even though the degree to which they believe a different thing is so slight. I mean, you look at the Quran, because obviously it was fighting Muslims.
Wow.
The Quran very much has it that the Muslim faith is like the sequel to Christianity, which in turn is the sequel to Judaism. And I'm not saying the sequel to be glib, but I'm talking about the continuation of it.
Wow.
Because in the Quran it says Jesus Christ was a prophet, but Muhammad is the prophet after him. So his teachings are the new updated ones, and they're the ones you're meant to follow.
Seriously? So it's like a chronological order, these faiths, almost?
More or less, yeah.
And you've mentioned this before last week. You said thou shalt not kill isn't actually as simple as what people think.
No, because what you've got to remember is that the 10 Commandments, of which there are basically 11, but that's by the by, were written by Jewish people. Yeah, there's more than 10. It's all in the reading and the translation, but let's go with the base 10.
Yeah.
Well, thou shalt not kill is a mistranslation from, I think, the Hebrew and the Aramaic, because you've got to remember that at this time, these rules were written for Jews. This was the rules, the Jewish rules. Moses was given these, and he was the leader of the Jewish tribe and what have you. And they weren't written for everyone. The Jews were very much isolated. They isolated themselves and they were isolated. But the Bible, you've got to remember, was written for Jewish people. It wasn't really written for, and it was rewritten latterly by Roman Empire.
It's so mad. How did I not know any of this?
But the thing is,
the Bible was written for Jews.
Yeah, because you got to remember the Old Testament is the Jewish Testament. That's what the Torah basically is. Mm-hmm. And after that, you've got Christianity, and and that comes about because of the Jews turning their back on Jesus and what have you. So the rule is not thou shalt not kill, it's thou shalt not murder members of your own tribe. It's an instruction for Jews not to kill Jews. Because there weren't that many.
Instruction.
Because they weren't that many. Well, the 10 Commandments, they're commandments, aren't they? Yeah. They're instructions.
Instructions.
They weren't that many of them, and they were at the time in quite dire straits. They were on the Exodus, leaving Egypt and whatnot to find the Holy Land, Israel and whatnot. And so, yeah, it wasn't thou shalt not kill. These were not things being written for everyone. Because you've got to remember their world was a lot smaller in those days. They didn't know, other than bits of the Roman Empire and whatnot, there's a vast chunk of the world wasn't really that well known.
Yeah.
And even what bits you did know, you couldn't get to a lot of them. So thou shalt not kill is a complete misunderstanding of it. The same way that, and this is a more controversial thing, but Mary being a virgin. Mary almost certainly wasn't a virgin. She was a newly married woman. She was vastly underage from what we would consider it. She was only been like 14, 15 tops. The idea that her husband, who was older than her, wasn't going to have sex with her on the day they were married is, one, ludicrous. It's not human nature for the most part. But two, more tellingly, the translation from the Aramaic gets it completely wrong, because Mary was pure of spirit. She was a holy vessel for the, Holy Ghost, whoever you want to say impregnated her. And the translation, the linguistic root, has got nothing to do with her body at all. Mary being a virgin was not the case. She was pure of spirit, which is why she could receive God's holy seed, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, so this whole thing about Mary being a virgin. And
so she was actually like an underage child who had
underage
sex.
By modern standards. You've got to remember.
Yeah, in the 21st century, highly underage.
Yeah, it would have been.
But she was a young female who would have already had sex, but her spirit was considered pure from God.
That's how the story works. Yeah.
So it wasn't an immaculate conception.
No, that's something that came in later on.
So in a way, the Mary's husband was the dad.
Oh well, I mean,
that's a biological way.
If you're sort of like being logical, but the thing is, religion relies on symbolism and interpretation, and to an extent, gullibility. And I don't mean that as a. But you've got to remember, literally, the human brain wasn't anywhere near as evolved as it was now. So Mary being a physical virgin is a very modern Judeo-Christian reinterpretation based on a sort of a. More of a dogmatic idea of like original sin, sex being a bad thing.
Yeah.
Even though when you stop to think about it, that makes no sense. One, why are we biologically programmed as one of 2 species, possibly 3 on the planet, to enjoy sex for pleasure as well as
what's the other species?
Dolphins, and I don't think it's been 100% proven, but whales possibly.
So no land, no. Obviously, surely dogs, they hump all day long.
They hump, yeah, but they hump when they're in heat. They have seasons where they're in heat.
And gorillas, they don't just do it for fun.
Well, if we're including primates, they do have sexual activity for fun, yes.
Okay.
But I'm talking about. Sorry, yeah, you're right. I should have clarified that. I should have just said primates, but humans specifically and dolphins specifically, and obviously gorillas and apes as part of the sort of like the whole similar branch.
Yeah.
So why would you have that? Why would you have that programmed in?
Yeah.
There's also the fact that it's entirely necessary for the species to exist.
To survive, to have a
So that means that God, whatever God you're subscribing to, is either a trickster God or a complete D-bag, because think about it, he set everything up in opposition.
Yeah.
And that's where you get the church's method of control, because if you control people's thoughts and you control their ability to have pleasure, then you can crush the spirit and control them full stop. That's why, like in George Orwell wrote in 1984, you had the mass celibacy, the women's celibacy movements, where they all vow not to have sex. And so the only sex that takes place in 1984 is purely for procreation. And not for
during the year of 1984 in America?
The book. The George Orwell book and play. And
so what year did the mass celibacy thing happen though? Do you know what?
Okay, so 1984...
The book
is set in 1984.
Okay.
But it's over a continuum of time, because the party, as they're called, control history, and they rewrite history all the time to suit the facts. Like they're at war with Oceania at one point, then Australasia, whatever suits them, because they're all fighting each other for resources, and so they can control the populace. Because if you're always on a war footing, the government can do whatever it wants and controls you and everything. So one of the things in that is they control sexuality. And they take away the idea of sex for fun, because people are not supposed to have fun. There's not supposed to be any joy. The joy is from serving the party. So women, they sort of brainwash everyone and indoctrinate them that sex is you do it to have babies and that's it. And you have it as sparingly as possible. And they even have scientists in it working in it to eliminate the human orgasm. There's a thing in it, I can't remember.
Didn't you tell me as well that in ancient Greece only men would have sex with men because women were inferior?
As a rule, yeah. And basically you would have, because it was very phallocentric and men were absolutely dominant, you would have sex with women for... This is not like across
everyone,
but the vast overwhelming social thing, the social norm,
mm-hmm.
it would very much could say that men, because men were considered better, they would have sex with other men for pleasure because they were intellectual equals for the most part. Obviously you would still have a spectrum, and you would have sex with women to breed, and women were considered very inferior in most senses. But like I said, that's one of the key elements, is controlling sexuality. I mean, that's why there's a whole book bit in the Bible about Onan pleasuring himself and that being considered wrong. Onanism is masturbation, and so the sin of Onan is
there's a sin called Onan, so it's like the sin.
Well, masturbation, the sin of Onanism is masturbation.
Okay.
Named after this.
So basically, they tried to these ruling religious parties just tried to take away all pleasure, tried to take away like stuff that we wanted to do, natural impulses within humans. They tried to control.
Yes. Yeah.
So try and control your mind, body, and spirit. They can try and control the way you think about your future existences and stuff. So you're literally just a slave of the mind to these religions. And go back, very much today.
It's still false. I mean, it's basically because you've got the sort of the control of the masses being like the dominant sort of paradigm. Constantine saw which way the wind was blowing, and he knew that the empire needed to embrace Christianity because it grew. Because it was a slave religion, that's what you have to remember. So Christianity is born of a slave mentality, and who gives the slave any kind of comfort or food or shelter? It's the master. So
what do you mean it's a slave religion?
It was grew with the slaves. The slaves embraced Christianity.
Black slaves.
Slaves, full stop. I mean, bear in mind we're talking about the Middle East here, so no one was really white.
Okay. So it was a religion created to keep the slaves in check.
That's certainly one theory. That's one I mostly subscribe to based on its origins and the way history's been whitewashed. Because
are we talking back 2,000 years ago? Yeah.
Give or take.
Origins.
Well, Constantine was around about 300 AD, give or take.
Okay.
The third Nicene Council basically chopped a load of stuff out and rewrote a load of stuff.
The third what?
Nicene Council. N-I-C...
Wait, whoa, this is deep. N-I-C...
A-E-N.
A-E-N.
Yeah, Council.
Because I know like the Gnostics in the 13th century that would have took out loads of information about dream
interpretations. Well, yeah, because there's whole... Oh, God, I'm going to forget the name of the book. But there are books in the Bible that were taken out, because you've got the Book of Enoch and you've got all the stuff about the Nephilim was taken out, and Exodus and Genesis, if you read it, there's clearly a missing book there that's been taken out and it's all been pulped together. But
pulped.
Yeah, literally. Well, it's the opening of the Bible is actually really clumsy if you read it as a narrative. It's really, there's clearly bits that have been truncated and cut out and everything. But yeah, so basically around about 303 AD, Constantine had the Bible rewritten to make it fit more so the slaves wouldn't rebel as much. And that's why you've got the ephemeral idea of, doesn't matter what happens to you now, like with the Sermon on the Mount, like the meek will inherit the earth. It's this ephemeral promise that don't rebel against governments and don't worry if you're being oppressed or having a miserable time, because you will get this reward after you die. Don't rebel against authority, because you will eventually get this reward and they'll lose out. And so things like reincarnation, Constantine and his people thought that confuses the issue, because if you live, you suffer, you die, you go to heaven if you do
good,
and hell if you don't.
Simple.
If you've got reincarnation as well, hang on a minute, does that mean that slave people might think, oh, I can come back as a
white man, or
come back as a slave owner, or
you
know, and that they wanted to make it a basic binary thing, heaven or hell, you know.
Wow.
And so Constantine chopped it up, and then you've got to remember that a lot of these books are written hundreds of years after the time of Jesus and everything. So a lot of it is passed on and misremembered and what have you. And then you come all the way back to King James, sort of bringing the narrative around again. And King James rewrote the Bible, and he didn't do it based on very much of what had gone before at all. It's a complete rewrite, a lot of it. And even to this day, you still have different sort of political things rewriting the Bible, because up until recent editions, you had, and again this is because of superstition, you had I'm gonna have to paraphrase, but the archangel sat on the right hand side of God, and because of various things and everything, they said, well, and it's nonsense, but that's rightist. You know, why would he sit on the right hand side of God? So that got taken out, and now just archangels in the modern versions of the Bible just sit at the side of God. And the reason that comes about is because of backward superstitions of Satanism and things. We had the left-hand path, which was the evil path, and if you wrote left-handed, up until very, very recently...
He was the devil, the son of a devil, wasn't he?
Yeah, and you would basically be forced to learn right with your right hand.
Yeah. My teachers in primary school always used to say that,
Yeah, and it's ludicrous, it's offensive, and it's backwards, and it's primitive, but that comes about because of religion.
So that King James, was it? If he'd seen a woman writing with her left hand, would he have killed her?
He would have at the very least, he would have had her tested for witchcraft, and probably. Because bear in mind, in those days...
And that's the person who wrote the Bible that billions of people today still subscribe to.
Oh yeah, King James Bible is the extant Bible. Yeah.
And people, but he was a witch hunter.
It was a complete nutcase. Yeah.
And he wrote the main book.
Well, he had people. He didn't write it all himself, but he contributed in. Well, the King James Bible is the King James Bible because he ordered it. And
he ordered it.
Well, he did.
Just in Argos, you know.
Yeah. There's a lot more emphasis on the evils of witchcraft and things like that in it, and so the basic, the stupid thing, the fundamental flaw at the end of all of this is you read the Book of Revelations, and it says explicitly. Well, two things it says. Not the first bit is not in Revelations. I think this bit's in Peter, I think. But I can't remember which. Don't quote me on that. I can look it up, But for all the people, all the Christians in the world who say, and I'm really not picking on Christianity here, but it's the one I've kind of been brought up with.
You've studied on it, yeah.
Because believe me, I've studied the Quran as well, and the Torah is the Old Testament.
He's well-rounded, respect it, yeah.
But basically, for all the Christians in the world who say, oh no, well the Bible, you have to interpret it. You know, when you see all these things where there's no commandments against rape, and if a woman gets raped by a man, she's only allowed to marry that man and no one else. and all the terrible things that happen in the Bible that you can't explain away at all.
So it says this in the Bible.
Yeah.
If you're raped and you're a Christian, you have to marry him.
No, well, if you're raped, full stop. If you're a woman, you can only marry a rapist. No one else can touch you.
And this hasn't been updated. This in the
no,
2019.
You read through the Bible. There are stuff that in modern sensibility is horrific.
What? Spell that for me.
What?
You said Montester.
Sensibility.
Oh, you said sensibility.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought that was like a section of the Bible.
Oh,
like
no.
Bible.
But you go into it, and the stuff that, and a lot of Christians will say, oh no, it's about how you interpret the Bible and everything. But there is a passage in the Bible, I think it's Peter, but don't quote me on that, but I know there is a passage in the Bible that expressly forbids interpreting the Bible. These are the word of God, they're immutable, they are not for man to interpret.
Wow.
So they
go against a lot of their own beliefs of how to read their own literature.
If we actually lived by Christian rules, genuine Christian rules laid out in the Bible, and even if you kind of like hand wave the contradictory bits, which they are, because Jesus had at least 3 different sets of last words before he died. Yeah, I kid you not.
Potential sets, you mean? Yeah, obviously.
Well, no, 3 different apostles say he said 3 different things as he died.
But they were all there.
Yeah. So they say.